Hey, can you help me out with something real quick? I'm trying to think of what's better than a fresh, crunchy on the outside, soft and airy on the inside, sourdough French baguette. Your silence speaks volumes. I can't think of anything either. It could be the greatest bread of all time. It is so delicious on its own. It could be used in so many different ways. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through how I make my sourdough French baguettes. Before we jump right into the dough, let's talk a little bit about the recipe so you can be prepared for it and know what you need and what techniques we're going to do. I would say this is a more advanced sourdough recipe because of the equipment you'll need or techniques we're going to be using. But the dough itself is pretty straightforward, and I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. So the first thing you're going to want for this recipe is a stiff starter or a stiff style levain. And this is something you'll want to have prepared for day one. If you've never heard of it before, don't worry, don't click away. I'll talk about it really quick. I have a video where I go in depth on what stiff starters are, but just to give you a quick overview for the recipe, the night before you start your recipe, all you do is take your existing sourdough starter, pour 15 grams of it into a separate jar, and then add 30 grams of bread flour to that jar and 15 grams of water. Mix it all together. It's going to form a little dough ball, which is exactly what you want, and then let that sit overnight to build up. And it's going to be like this. It's going to be stiff. It's going to not be liquidy like your normal starter is. And the idea behind this is it will help speed up your fermentation in your baguettes. It will create a more mild taste in the final product and help with different gluten structure components. So that's what you'll want to have for this recipe. Very easy. If you have any questions at all, leave a comment and I'll be happy to answer it for you. The next thing you'll want to have is a couche. So this is a couche I bought off Amazon. It is a heavy linen couche. It's reminiscent of a kitchen towel, but much heavier and more rigid. We're going to set our baguette dough once we finish shaping them in this, and the heaviness of it helps prevent sticking. It also helps shape the final product as far as rigid sides and everything go. You can get by without this, but it makes your life a whole lot easier if you have one of these. I'll put a link in the description for one, the same one I use, if you don't have one already. Alternatively, you could use a kitchen towel and that would be okay too. Just make sure it's wide enough to handle your baguette, which is going to be about 16 to 20 inches once we're finished shaping it. The most important thing you need to know is how to open bake. So you need to know how to make your own steam, because when we're talking about baguettes, they're 16 to 20 inches long, and that's not going to fit in your Dutch oven. I have an in-depth video on how to do that in your home oven above, and it's really very simple, but you need to have some components in order to do that. So that video will talk about it. Open baking is something I think is worthwhile to learn. You can use it for more than just baguettes. You can use it for a wide array of things, and it really makes your life a lot easier in a way when you don't have to rely on a Dutch oven. If you don't want to open bake and you're using something like a Challenger bread pan or a Fourneau oven, you could consider making these baguettes into demi baguettes or mini baguettes and putting them in your Challenger bread oven or your Fourneau bread oven and just making a smaller size baguette. But if you want the full thing, you're going to have to open bake. And again, check out that video if you want more details on that. So let's get into the dough. This recipe is going to make 2 full-size baguettes. And for this recipe, I'm using an 82% hydration formula. What that means is that the amount of liquid compared to the weight of the flour is 82%. The reason I'm telling you this is because if you know the formula I'm using, it allows you to scale the recipe up for whatever occasion you need. If you need to have more than 2 baguettes, you can scale up the recipe. So I'm going to start with a quick Autolyse. So I have my mixing bowl here and a food scale. I'm going to add 260 grams of flour to the mixing bowl. I'm using bread flour. And I'm going to add 222 grams of water. Now, what I'm going to do is take this off the scale and fully mix it together. I don't need it to be completely mixed. I don't need to spend too much time on this. What I'm doing is doing an Autolyse, and this is just going to help the gluten structure form in the dough before I add anything else. So here's what it looks like. I'm going to cover this for 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes. My dough has had a chance to Autolyse and form some gluten structure to it. I'm going to add the final 2 components now. The first one is salt. I'm going to use 2% of the weight of the flour in salt, which is about 6 grams. Now, I would recommend weighing out your salt before you put it in the bowl. I've done that here. The reason why is because if you add too much salt, it can really screw things up, and there's really no going back once you've added an accidental large amount of salt. So I'm going to add 6 grams of salt to the dough. And the last component is the stiff starter or levain. And I had this created for the exact amount of the recipe. This is 15 grams of mature starter, 30 grams of bread flour, and 15 grams of water that has been fermenting overnight. So I'm going to scoop this out and plop it onto the dough. Now, this next part, you want to make sure it's fully mixed together. You want to make sure all the salt is integrated in, all the stiff starter or levain is integrated in. You could use a mixer. I like to use my hands for recipes like this. I'm just simply poking my fingers through the dough to mix it in that way. You can rough up the dough a little bit. You just want to keep going for about 5 minutes until everything's fully integrated together or mixed together. Now that that's mixed, take a moment to get all the extra dough off of your hands if you mixed it by hand like me. All right, little YouTube magic. My hands are nice and clean. We're going to cover this back up for about 2 hours. We're just going to let it sit for 2 hours, let it ferment. It's been about 2 hours at this point. Our dough has been sitting here. It's starting its fermentation process. It looks like this. It's a very wet dough, very sticky dough. And what we're gonna do now is do some coil folds. And this is gonna help tighten it up a little bit and help it continue on its gluten forming fermentation process. What I like to do is just get a tiny bit of water on my fingertips, just like a tiny little bit, and then pick up the dough and put it down. And if you're familiar with coil folds, what you're doing is you're picking up a side of the dough and then folding it over on itself. Now, when you're first doing this, it's going to be a real sticky mess. But as you can see, as we continue to do this, it gets a little bit easier. As you can see, it's a lot smoother than it was before. And here's a little bubble that's forming. Now, we're gonna do this 3 times total. And typically what you're looking for before we put this in the fridge for the overnight cold ferment is that this has not doubled, but gained about 50 to 75% in volume. Another thing you can do to check if it's ready to go in the fridge is the poke test, where you take a floured finger, poke it down, and if it slowly rises back to the surface, that means that we're in good shape. So we're gonna do this 2 more times throughout the day. I wish I could give you an exact time frame for that, but it really depends on how hot your house is. I'm guesstimating that since I started this at about 9 a.m., I'm going to be putting this in the fridge at approximately 2 p.m., but I'm just going to have to monitor it throughout. It could go a little quicker than that. It could go a little longer, give or take an hour or so, either way. So you just want to keep an eye on it throughout the day. Okay, so my dough has had a chance to ferment for a while. It's about 2:30 p.m. now. Just tilting my dough over. It's got some nice bubbles forming, and the volume is what I'm looking for mostly. I would say it's not quite doubled, but about 75% volume increase, which is perfect. Ultimately, that's what we're looking for right before we put it into the fridge. We're going to cover it up and put it in there. It's going to finish the rest of the fermentation in the fridge. It's going to cool down and slow down that process. It's going to build up a great flavor profile. And since this is such a higher hydration dough, it's going to make it easier for us to work with tomorrow on day 2 when we need to remove it from the bowl. It will be nice and chilled. The gluten will be tighter and easier to work with. So as far as how long you want to keep it in the fridge, the sweet spot is between 12 to 24 hours. That's when you'd want to plan to take it out and have started your proofing and everything that I'll talk about in the next section of the video. Anything over 48 hours is really pushing it, because then you're going to start overproofing the dough and bad things are going to happen. So aim for the 12 to 24 hour spot. I'm going to take this out at 10 a.m. tomorrow and start the shaping and proofing process. So let's put this in the fridge and I'll see you in the next section, or day 2. All right, here we are on day 2. It's about 10 a.m. I just pulled my dough from the fridge. It was doing a slow cold ferment overnight. And right now it's pretty cold. It's still a little bit sticky. This is a higher hydration dough, so that's why having it cold ferment really helps you work with the dough. So what we're gonna do now is split this into 2 and shape it into dough balls. So I've got a slightly floured workstation here. I've got my food scale. I'm gonna do about 270 grams for each one. 260, 268, 270. All right, so I'm going to set my food scale aside and flip this over and shape it into a nice ball. As far as the amount of time in the fridge, as I talked about earlier, 12 to 24 hours is ideal. Never more than 48, then you're going to get into overproof territory. So 12 to 48 hours is a good amount of time to keep it in there, depending upon what your schedule looks like on day 2. You have a little flexibility there. And what I'm doing is just folding the surfaces kind of stretching it and folding it under itself, similar to how you do like a pizza ball. And then I'll just let this sit here for about 30 minutes to an hour to let it get up to closer to room temp, and just let it rest a little bit so that it's easier to work with when we're shaping it. Okay, so these have had a chance to rest, and now it is time to shape them. This is one of the trickier parts of the whole process. To start, I have my couche to the left. I apologize for mispronouncing that at the beginning of the video. I always call it couche, but it's actually couche. Just a habit, I guess. But I have this to the side. This is a big couche, so I have it rolled up, and I'm only using it for 2 baguettes, so I don't need the whole thing. And this rolled up side will act as a little wall for the edge of my baguette. And so what I want to do is just cover this with some flour. You can be very generous with the amount of flour you throw down there. It's going to help it from sticking. And that's really something you want to avoid, is having your baguette stick to anything once it's shaped, because they're just so delicate. So what I'm going to start with is just sprinkling the top of one of the balls. And I'm going to take my bench scraper and scoop up underneath it and plop it down like this. Now, what I'm going to do is take this outer half here and fold it into the middle, just like this. This is a very sticky dough as it is, so it's going to stick right to the middle. And then I'm going to take the bottom and fold it upward over that fold. And I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit more flour there. And now what I'm going to do is take this underneath edge and bring it all the way to the front edge and then press it down. So I'm just going to lift it up like this. I like to start in the middle, press it down, go along the edge, press it down, press it down, press it down, press it down. Now that I've got a little log formed, I'm just going to take my fingers, get them a little bit filled with flour, and push along the edges to seam it up. And I've got my little baguette log here. All right, so now that we've got our log and it's floured up and we've pressed into the surfaces on the front edge to kind of seal it, we're going to stretch this out. There's a couple different ways to do this, just like with shaping. What I like to do, again, is just make sure that my surface is floured, and I like to pick it up and just roll it like this and pull on it. So what I'm doing is pulling on it like this very gently. So I'm just very loosely grabbing it and reflouring the edges and just kind of shaking it and pulling it. And as it gets longer, it's going to get stickier because it's more surface area being exposed that didn't have the flour from before. So you just want to make sure that you kind of reflour as you go and get it to its desired length. What we're shooting for is between 16 and 18 inches, which is about what it is now. It's a little thicker in the center, so I'm just going to gently pull on it a little bit. All right. Now, this is the last part, and this is the what I consider the trickiest part, is getting the edges nice and peaked, so they look a little rough when you're pulling it like that. But what I do is just grab it and then roll the edges to kind of make a nice point. Now, once I've got that, I'm going to lift it up and put it along the edge of my couche on this rolled wall. And what I'm going to do is just pinch up so that it forms a new wall. And then I can put my second baguette right there. So again, I'm going to reflour my surface. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on the top. And flip it over. I'm going to take the back edge here and put it in the middle. I'm going to take the front edge and fold it over to the outer edge like that. And then I'm going to take this outer edge again and bring it over and pinch it down. I like to start at the middle. And then now that that's got its basic shape, I'm going to go through and just pinch off the edges so that it forms a nice seal. And then we've got our log again. Now, again, make sure it's nice and floured. Just makes everything much easier. And then lift it up and just kind of shake it and gently pull it out. Gently pull it out. Some people like to do the rolling method, whatever you find more comfortable. Again, I'm not grasping this very hard, to just very gently. I've got a very gentle handle on it, and I'm just gently kind of pulling it and shaking it a bit. I'm going to reflour this. All right, now one thing to remember is that you want to make sure that you're not stretching it too far out. You want to make sure that since you're open baking, you want to make sure that you're fitting within the dimensions of your baking steel or pizza stone or whatever you're using, because you don't want to plop it on there and then have it fall over the edge. All right, so here we go. Just gonna pinch off the edges here to get a nice point and plop it down. And then I'm gonna make a new wall here and just push this against the cutting board so that it doesn't go anywhere. And we're going to let these sit for about 1 to 2 hours. We want these to get nice and puffy. They're going to fill in this little container we've made with the couche. And then we're going to score them and bake them. So this is a great time to preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius. You want to make sure that any baking equipment you're using in there has a chance to preheat for at least an hour, because we're going to do steam. So we want it to be nice and hot in there. Here's how I have my oven configured for my open bake. As you can see, I've got a baking steel, and it's on the lower middle rack, and underneath I've got a pan of lava rocks. This is how I prefer to steam my oven when I'm doing an open bake. There are other ways that I talk about in my other video on open baking, but this is what I'm going to be using for the baguettes today. I have this preheating for about an hour at 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius. We are back, and this is the most exciting part of the whole process, besides, of course, eating it. Our baguettes have had a chance to proof for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. As you can see, they've filled out their little cubbies and they've risen quite a bit. Now our oven is preheated. It's been preheating this whole time. It's ready for us. Now what we need to do is transfer them to a pizza peel or something similar that will allow you to transport them into your oven. I'm using this baking steel pizza peel, and I'm going to have a piece of parchment on top of it. To get them from the Couche to the pizza peel, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can use like a transfer board. Like if you have a smaller board that can fit the entire baguette, you can kind of flip it onto that and transfer it over. I personally prefer the simple way of just very gently and quickly grabbing each side and bringing it over like this. I've done many different ways, and honestly, just picking it up really gently and bringing it over quickly has no real impact on the final result, as long as you're not messing around with it too much. And then, of course, you want to have a very sharp razor or bread lom ready to go. These are difficult to score because it's such a soft dough. It hasn't come right out of the fridge like our sourdough loaves do. It's gonna drag a little bit, so the sharper your bread lom is, the better and easier it's gonna be. So let me get those transferred onto the pizza peel. But first, I'm gonna flour the top very lightly. This just adds a little aesthetics to the final product. Completely optional step. All right, now I'm gonna pick this up by both of its ends here and just bring it right onto the pizza peel. And I'm gonna do the same thing with this one. Now that these are on here, I'm going to score them. So again, you're gonna want a really sharp bread lom, and you're gonna wanna score them not this way, but down the baguette, like this. 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna redo this one. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now I'm going to put these in my oven, which is preheated to 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius. And I'm going to steam these for 20 minutes and then take the steam out and bake them for about 5 to 10 minutes or until they get to a nice golden brown color. All right, wasn't that fun? I hope you had a good time. This is one of my favorite recipes ever. I love going through this whole process. And honestly, it's a little intimidating at first because of all the different steps and techniques, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be making these all the time. And these are definitely a fan favorite. Everyone loves baguettes. And this is how they turned out. So they're a nice golden brown color. Feels very light. It's a lightweight bread, and you can hear the crunching as I hold it up to the microphone. So very crunchy exterior, and let's take a look at the inside and see how that turned out. So here's the inside, and I'll cut this in half. And as you can see, it's very airy and open on the inside. And that's thanks in part to our stiff levain and our high hydration dough. So typically, most recipes usually will call for like 70 to 75% hydration. But we went with a higher hydration of 82%. That's my favorite. I just love that open and airy crumb on the interior. So that's what I always stick by when I'm making baguettes. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a list of different things I used in the description of this video. I'll put the recipe down there as well as the different timings that I used in case anyone has any questions on that. And I'd love to hear from you on how this process went. A couple tips I'd have are with baguettes and open baking. You know, everyone's oven is a little different. So I had the temperature at 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius. If you find that these are getting too brown too quick for you when you bake those, next time around, lower the temperature 25 degrees in your oven and try again. Once the steaming portion is done, you want these to be just a light brown, and then you want them to get nice and golden brown after the steaming portion is done. Another thing to keep in mind is, you know, going back to what I said about the Challenger bread pan or Fourneau oven, if you don't have an open baking setup, what I would do is follow the same process, except instead of making 2 baguettes, split that dough into 4 pieces and aim for like an 8 to 9 inch baguette that would fit in your Fourneau or Challenger bread pan. And of course, I'd love to hear from you on how it went with your walkthrough of this recipe, whether it was your first time making baguettes, maybe you're a seasoned veteran, but it's your first time trying sourdough baguettes, or maybe you're just trying a new technique or style where mine's a little different than the one you've tried before. I'd love to hear and how it went and any struggles or successes you had along the way. And also, I'd love to know how you like to eat your baguettes. Are you more of a plain baguette with butter or jam? Do you like to cut it up for a charcuterie board? Do you like to make sandwiches? What do you like to use your baguettes for? I'm always curious. I personally love to just have them with butter or as like a side dish to a meal. Occasionally I like to make really fancy sandwiches with them because those are always delicious. It's such a versatile bread. So please share with me what you like to do with those. And of course, check out my other videos if you like my style of video recipe. And thank you for watching. Happy baking, everyone.